I am Frank Holland, anchor of CNBC's Worldwide Exchange. Welcome to the final panel of this Student Innovation Summit, AI's Impact on Journalism. We're going to discuss how news organizations are using artificial intelligence and the biggest challenges that journalists are facing, especially with the U.S. election now just 41 days away. Also, whether journalists can responsibly use this tech while keeping the public trust. All right, joining me now, we really have an outstanding panel. Rashida Jones, president of MSNBC. She's worked in so many newsrooms. She's worked with so many great reporters that we all know and we watch every day. We also have Morgan Malone, executive director of City Bureau, which is a nonprofit media organization on the South Side of Chicago. City Bureau won a Pulitzer Prize using AI in their reporting. I think you have a copy of that reporting for everybody here today. And also, Brian Carovillano, sorry about that, Brian, senior vice president, head of standards with NBC News. Really great panel. Big round of applause for these guys. I want to thank the three of you for making the time to be here. We really appreciate it. And a very quick reminder for our audience watching virtually. You can drop questions for the panelists in the Q&A tab on the right of your screen. All right, so we're going to get started. Everybody ready? I know it's the last session. Are you guys ready? Right. Raise your hand. Anybody here that wants to be a journalist? I know it's like almost everybody, yeah.
That's great.
So this is going to be a really informative panel. Rashida, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you.
Sure thing.
An April survey from Elon University. It found over 3/4 of Americans expect that AI misinformation will impact this presidential election. How is MSNBC preparing for this? Has your team, do you feel like they've been able to meet the challenge?
I do. I mean, misinformation and disinformation has been a problem for a long time. I can think back the last couple of elections, we've had to put specific procedures in place to ensure what we were reporting is accurate, what we were reporting is a reflection of what's happening out in any given precinct or a voting location, but also that our own content isn't being manipulated. So this is something we think about on an ongoing basis, particularly during election cycles where there are some people who are incentivized to misrepresent content. And so our filters, both technological but also editorial, are up. You know, if something feels, all of the usual things that we think about, something feels too wild and out there, take a second look. The challenge in this news cycle, and I don't say this lightly, everything feels nonsensical. Every time a story breaks, I always stop and say, like, wait, what? Did that really happen? Unfortunately, many times it's accurate, but we have to go through these filters to ensure what we are bringing to the audience is accurate. And I think it's particularly important during election cycles and for an organization like ours, because the moment you violate that trust, the moment you make a mistake and something inaccurate gets out there and it's on your watch under your brand, it just erodes your credibility with the audience. So we've got teams that are focused just on this. We have teams that are focused on parts of the internet that I dare not go into myself, because we want to make sure anything that comes through our brand is a reflection of the truth.
Really important, really important. I mean, just the truth, the news being the truth is important to so many people. Of course, the credibility of MSNBC. Brian, you're coming up next. Got a chilling stat for you. In 2023, according to the National Intelligence Council, deepfakes in North America, they grew by over 1,700%. How can AI be used to assist with fact-checking or combating misinformation and reporting?
There are a number of tools that are sort of coming up. It's become a really kind of crowded, competitive space of AI tools being used to detect AI. And we've been working with a couple of them, testing them. And, you know, to varying degrees, they can be an effective way to sort of start the process of assessing whether something is real or not real. None of them actually are a substitute for just like good old-fashioned journalism skills, though. It's actually reporting that is the most important thing. I mean, the first and most important thing is to hit pause and make sure you give yourself the time and the space to adequately investigate whether something is real or not real. But then picking up the phone, you know, looking for context clues, like, you know, was this taken where it purports to be taken, of the people it purports to be taken to? There are ways to kind of report that out that are actually traditional journalism methods, and what we found is those still matter more than anything else. That said, I mean, AI gets smarter and it gets better, and these tools are going to get better and better, and we're going to keep working with them, and I think it's important to kind of keep track of that, but it's also important not to lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, it's the reporting that really matters.
You know, I think reporters have to get better and better as well.
Yes.
So speaking of, I know we have a lot of reporters here. Get your pens ready, get your phones out. Here are some quick websites that you need to keep in mind. Or check out, I should say. Keep in mind, nothing is 100%. So the first one we're going to mention here is TinEye. It's a reverse image search tool to tell you if an image has appeared on the internet before. NBC News' social news gathering team uses this tool all the time. Also, experts with the Carol Nealon Project for Responsible Journalism, they recommend Deepware, which can help you scan and detect deepfake videos. And RTDNA, which stands for the Radio, Television, Digital News Association, has also released guidelines on the use of AI in journalism. Feel free to check those out. All right, so we spoke earlier about just some of the tools that you can use. I want to just kind of switch gears, just talk about some of the great reporting you can use. You talk about tools to detect AI and deepfakes, but using AI in journalism. Morgan, I'm going to come over to you. It's critical that journalism students become familiar with AI as they enter the news field. Charles Rahm from Columbia College, he wants to know, what should students know about AI to be prepared for the workplace?
That everyone can tell that it's AI. It's so interesting. I think AI has come out and people find it to be this awesome tool, and I can get pictures really quickly, I can get facts really quickly, I can get story headlines really quickly. And if you bring it to someone who has honed their craft in the workplace or in an industry or field, they're going to look at it and know immediately that it is not accurate. And so I think it still needs a human component. There will never be, it was said earlier today, that AI will support chores. And it won't take jobs, it won't take checks. And it's true. I think so much of what you should be thinking about related to AI is responsible coverage, how you are still maintaining integrity in the work that you're doing while using AI as a tool to support your writing, but not to be the end-all be-all for your end product.
So Morgan, we have a question from you. This is from Dazia from our virtual audience. She wants to know, can ChatGPT help in creating rundowns and leads for news broadcast? Or actually, maybe Rashida, I think this one may actually be for you.
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily use it in that function. I think it's designed to be a support tool. So, the ways I use it, I think of it as almost a different version of Google. So if I'm trying to aggregate information or find information, things like formatting, for example, I may use it for things like that. Part of the beauty and the art of producing is understanding your audience, understanding your market if you're a local, and how do you tell stories that are relevant to that audience. That's not something that technology can tell you how to do. Those are the kind of if you think about the world that we live in as far as like the art and the science, that's the art of the work that we do. The science is how do you use tools to create efficiency? How do you use tools like that to, pull together data and research? I think that's more of a valuable function. And I think especially early in your career, some of those core functions like storytelling, story selection, those are things you're going to want to hone as a journalist no matter what, because it can translate in any other place. If you start off using technology to teach you how to do that, you'll never have those core skills. I'll tell you one of and this is a tech thing, but one of the most important skills I learned early in my career as a producer was how to back time in my head. And so, sure, I can use iNews or EMPS or whatever it is to tell me what time I should be hitting the break. But I can also eyeball the rundown and tell you when we should do it. And the reason I did that, and this is why, while technology is helpful, you have to be thoughtful. The one time the technology fails you and shuts down, and it happened to me, and this happened at this point probably 20 years ago. I will never forget the moment that the technology failed me. And I was like, wait, people do this in their heads? I never forgot how to do it because you just never know when that moment's going to come up.
What market was that?
Market number, I think it was 81 maybe at the time.
Columbia?
No, it was Norfolk, Virginia.
All right, but still, a big newscast, thousands of
Oh,
people
it was a big
watching.
show. There was no such thing as, no, we'll wait till the computers reboot. So you just can't lean on technology to replace core skills, and I consider that a core skill.
Absolutely. So I know we have a lot of journalists here or aspiring journalists. Remember, you can ask a question. It's very rare to get this level of access. You just need to go to the mic if you have a question that you want to ask, okay? We have another question for you, Rashida. Let's turn to something that's on the minds of a lot of people, maybe even people here in the audience, job replacement. Yep. All right, Morgan just cut in on a bit. We have a pre-submitted question from Nikki Cronus at Duke University. They would like to know, how can AI help journalists while not threatening their careers?
I think it's a very important question, and I think it's something we're talking about in industries across the world. I see AI and I see, whatever the technology is around the corner as a supplement to the core work that we do. I think it's really powerful to help find efficiencies. I think it's really powerful to help with aggregation. I think it's really powerful as a supplement to what you do. The jobs may change, the function may change. When we started in television, there are things, or news in general, there are things that we would do manually that now can be done by automation. Teleprompter is an example of that. The functions change, but the need for the work that you're doing may change, but the fact that you're able to bring unique things to the table won't change. It just may mean some of the things that are kind of more perfunctory tasks may not be things that you spend much of your day on, and it frees up time for more creative space, frees up time for things like investigative reporting. I know some of the work that you guys are doing, you've been able to use it to supplement. So I think it's really supplemental.
Right. Anybody here worried about AI possibly making it harder to find a job? Anybody here worried about that? All right, a few of you.
But I think the answer to that is learn the technology. You know, I definitely started in the category of no, keep away. We can't let this into our newsrooms, and there are risks and challenges. And pretty quickly came around the bend to understand if we understand it, we understand that where we can add value. We know how to hone and harness it. We know how to put regulation and checkpoints into our processes in our newsrooms. This actually can be a good thing. And it's one of those things where the technology is so far ahead of us, we're not going to be able to put the toothpaste back into the tube. So how do we embrace it and find ways to make ourselves better journalists?
Right. There are a lot of examples of where journalism, where AI has already been used to supercharge journalism and do things that you couldn't do before AI. The City Bureau project that won the Pulitzer being a good example of that. I think it's a great idea to familiarize yourself with that and look what's going on out there, because one of the things that AI has done is it's lowered the barrier to entry dramatically of doing really sophisticated, ambitious reporting that you used to need rooms full of developers to do even 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you're really leading me to my next question. It's for you, Morgan. City Bureau and Invisible Institute, you won the Pulitzer Prize. That's an applause line, guys. The Pulitzer Prize. You won the Pulitzer Prize this year for the investigative series Missing in Chicago. AI was crucial for your reporters to comb through thousands of police investigations into missing and murdered black women, a very serious subject, really overlooked in many cases. How did your newsroom decide to use artificial intelligence for this story? How did you use it? How did you decide where to use it and when to use it?
This is a cool story because I think some people feel that AI is going to be the thing that tells you what the story is, when in reality what ended up happening was we were combing through complaint cases. We were combing through records of complaints, tens of thousands of records with over 200 volunteers, and the machine to build out an algorithm to be able to find the trends in those records. The trend that we found in that record was that we needed to explore missing persons cases, but we wouldn't have found that without the support of the algorithm and the help. And so I think some folks are like, oh great, I'm going to use AI to help me build out a story I already have in my mind, when in reality, if you're doing data journalism, just getting the records, getting access to the data, and then having an algorithm can help you think through 10 or 20 other stories, of which times we found that there was a trend there. 70% of missing people in Chicago are black women and girls. And we're sure that there's an even higher number of Latino women and girls as well that are not represented in this number. We wouldn't have known that or had it documented for people to take action at the legislative level or otherwise if we had not done this reporting and had AI to support looking through tens of thousands of records. A traditional newsroom would need a team of people and years to go through all of those records. The records, allowed us the time to focus on real reporting, relationship building. The records and the AI allowed us to move quickly so that we could spend all of our time in deep relationship with our sources.
Yeah, again, really impactful work, really important work. I just want to ask you from a personal question. When you look at local news, especially in AI, how can local news or AI make local news more impactful? How can it grow its reach? I mean, a lot of times we talk about sometimes people are watching local news, sometimes they're not. What can we do to use AI to make local news better?
The future of sustainability in news is trust. And AI allows us to get through deep data sets quickly, and that's what people are looking for. All over the country, everyone is saying, I want to trust my local news source. How do I know what I'm hearing is really the truth? Our ability to use AI to support deep investigation, deep research, is going to be the thing that fuels people saying, oh, okay, cool, I know where this came from. I see the how. It allowed for us to say, here was our process. Not just that we did this reporting, but here's how we got here in a way that people would see, oh, evidence-based. Oh, here's the evidence. Oh, here's where that evidence came from. Okay, cool. They didn't just make this up, which has been true of our practice all along. You know, we have people going to public meetings documenting on a day in and day out basis. And so the ability to generate trends across the country, AI is going to be able to support in that just by having everyday people and journalists going and seeing what's going on in their communities. And so I think we really cannot underestimate the gold mine that we have in AI, the opportunity that we have in AI as a supportive tool to lift us all up.
So I think we have our first question. I'm hoping it's our first question from the audience. We have an audience question. Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. Please. Can I have you say your first, last name, where you're from, your major, all those things?
Hello, my name is Greer Stewart, and I'm an audio engineer and reporter for the Columbia Chronicle. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Meta AI. Recently, Meta has the AI chatbot, which utilizes voices such as John Cena and Aquafina to talk back to its users, to create, connect, and even do homework. However, it has also an agent that limits political content and also automatically reduces fact-checking unless users are aware that this option is available through the settings tab on social media. I know that myself and a lot of the people in the audience are guilty of going through the terms and conditions, not realizing that these type of things exist. So my question is, how can students who use social media, can they use it responsibly with AI chatbots limiting, and especially when it is deliberately spreading misinformation?
Brian, you want to tackle this one first?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it a little bit, but I think familiarizing yourself with the tools that you're using is really important right now because the tools are changing so quickly, so taking the time to really understand what are the capabilities and shortcomings of these things. I think when you said not everybody, who gets to the end of the terms of use understands all of them, I think most people don't even bother looking at the terms of use. I don't think we have the luxury of doing that as journalists. I think we have to really understand these tools. For a lot of the reasons you just said, I think that's a tool that we should really, think twice about using in our newsrooms because the information that's going to come out of it is not going to be reliable information. And in particular, the sort of AI version of John Cena's voice or something like that, I mean, that's not John Cena, right? And I think it's really important for us to be transparent with our audiences if ever we were exposing them to an AI facsimile of a real person's voice, to tell them that that is an AI facsimile of a real person's voice, or better yet, don't use it at all.
Great. Do anybody else want to take a quick answer or?
I think it's good.
Okay, good. Brian, thank you. Greer, thank you so much. All right, we have a question from the virtual audience now. Chris Ann would like to know, how can young journalists use AI while maintaining the human aspect that computers cannot provide? Rashida?
I think number one, educating yourselves on the technology. Greer mentioned one function. Every platform has its own version of it. So familiarizing yourself, what's the Google version versus the OpenAI version versus the Meta version? What are some of the similarities and differences? So you at least have the language and versatility of how these products work. And then I think your question is actually the answer. Part of the value that we bring as journalists and part of the value that you can't replicate with computers is the human aspect. And so if you're able to use technology to help streamline some of the more routine things, like some of the stuff Morgan talked about around data gathering, if you've taken a lot of that off the table, what does it open up for you in the way of bringing humanity to your reporting? Finding the people's story isn't something a computer can do. Talking to a grieving mother with compassion isn't the story to do. Yvette always tells this story, I don't know if she's still in here, about early in her career where everyone was going this way because the crowd was gathering around the principal during this news event, and she went that way because the person was sneaking out the back door with the hook and the angle that no one else had. How do you as a journalist go do that thing? If you're bogged down with things that can be operationalized, like logging, like some of the data gathering stuff, if you can get some of that off of your plate and focus on the thing that maybe no one else is getting, focus on the angle that is really why people tune in. The stories that you do that people remember aren't necessarily the stories that are just about information. The stories you talked about, it wasn't necessarily the numbers that got people, it was the human stories, and I think that's what we bring because we bring whether or not technology is in play, and we're able to do more of it because you've got technology to help streamline.
Absolutely. We have another audience question, actually. Hello, can I have you say your first, your last name, your major, and then your question, please?
Yeah, so my name is Ruben Romo. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, studying communications. My question is mainly in terms of the recent talks about the elections. So given given the issues that we've learned about misinformation in the previous elections, how do you guys anticipate that artificial intelligence will play a role in this current election and in political stories moving forward? Do you think it'll be a positive role overall or negative?
I think it can be both. AI, I say all the time that we've designed our way into this world and we're going to design our way into the next phase of it. AI isn't happening to us. We're designing with our values what the technology is. So when we think about this, at the same time, that there's so much misinformation out here and so many deepfakes, there are also companies who are doing AI fact-checking. There are also companies that are aggregating things all over the world to ensure that we are getting trusted information and being able to say on the spot, not true, true. And so that's a tool, that's a benefit. And so AI is always going to replicate our values. And so when we think about how this is going to impact the elections, look for the people who are doing AI products that align with your values, who are solving for the things you need people to be responsive to, because those technology products exist. And the key for journalism and all of us is how can we be as responsive as possible? Technology too, anybody producing a product.
Yeah, a really important question. Brian, if you don't mind, we'd love to get your take on this as well.
I think the value that people can bring to the process can never be underestimated, right? And so there will be people who will try to mislead us using artificial intelligence. We will, to Morgan's point, use artificial intelligence tools to try and debunk those things. But at the end of the day, the value that a person and their critical thinking skills can bring to that situation in terms of explaining people. I always say that the purpose of journalism is to show the world the way it actually is, and only people are really able to kind of get to the bottom of that. And the answer is still reporting, right? We can be reporting with these supercharged tools that are amazing in their capabilities and everything, but there needs to be a person at the end of that process who's able to think critically about the information and then decide how to deliver it to people. And so that's never going to go away. Andrew from LinkedIn, who was on one of the earlier panels, had this line that was like, the future of work is still people. And my line is, the future of journalism is still journalists. Yeah. And the critical thinking skills, the creativity, the communication skills that people can bring to the table are not something that a bot is going to be able to replicate. And if we are able to automate more rote functions, things that don't tap into our creative skills or our communication skills, how are we going to use that time then to do more of that, to do more of the things that only a person can do?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, Brian, we have another question for you from the audience. This one's from Emmanuel. He wants to know, at what point does it become unethical to use AI in online journalism?
I think it becomes unethical primarily when it's misleading. If we're using artificial intelligence to, again, create a world or a sense or an image or a set of facts that it does not reflect reality, then I think that's unethical. And I think a lot of stuff kind of flows from that. And so even if we're using AI in our journalism, you'll see a lot of news organizations have been very transparent about how they're using AI in their journalism. Someone just sent me a thing yesterday. The Miami Herald now is using AI to pull a lot of the B matter into their stories so that they can produce those stories faster. And so as a young writer, I would get the news in my lead, and then I would spend 10 minutes basically pulling background on like, how far is this from New York City? And has this happened before? And who is that person? And all of that. The AI now can do that part of it for you, meaning you can get the news out a lot faster. But they have a note there that says artificial intelligence was used to gather background information here, which then went through an editor. So there was a person at the end of that process and went out into the world. And so I think transparency is really critical when it comes to ethics around AI, and just authenticity is the main thing. We don't want to mislead our audience into thinking things are true that are not true.
Right. As journalists, I don't think there's anything bigger than making sure what we report out is true, and also holding the trust of that audience, that they know when you come to us that we've done our best to vet everything.
Exactly.
So Rashida, I want to ask you, you work with so many great journalists, they work for you. What do you tell them about artificial intelligence and also the ethics of using it in their reporting?
Tell them to call Brian. No, I think your point about transparency is a really smart one for a couple of reasons. I think it further reinforces the relationship we have with our audience. I have a colleague, Janelle Rodriguez, who runs many things, including our streaming platform, and she put it in a way that I thought just had the right framing, and I've tried to use, and the idea is plagiarism is plagiarism. If you didn't write it, if you didn't create it, as a journalist, it's not okay to say that you did. So whether your colleague wrote it, whether you lifted it from the internet, whether a chatbot created it for you, if you're not disclosing to the audience that where the information came from, that's a break in trust. And so whether it comes from a person or technology, that communication and that transparency shouldn't change. So I think that's particularly important. And I think, so there's the transparency and the origin of your content, but then the other side of that is also, kind of approaching it with a little bit of a curious entrepreneurial spirit. There may be ways to incorporate the use of this technology that we're not thinking of. You know, I'm actually pretty familiar with most of the platforms just because I've taken the time to learn them, to use them. My kids use them. What's interesting, and for the students in here or recent students, most college syllabuses will have some clause in there about, we're not telling you not to use it, but if you use it, here's how you disclose it. Here are the areas where it's okay. Schools have already figured out how to put parameters around it. And I think that the idea there is, we're not going to pretend that you don't have access to this. We're going to use technology to determine if you're using it, and there are lots of different ways that you can put content into programs, and it will tell you, no, this was created by an AI platform. But I think the transparency, the communication, but also be curious about it. Don't assume like there's bad. Don't assume that using it is a violation of your journalistic integrity. Like, there are ways to do it that you guys will probably discover. You guys will probably innovate way before I can. And again, as someone who's pretty familiar with the various versions of the technologies out there, we're leaning on you guys who are going to be more nimble, more early in your career to come up with that innovation.
We probably got to remember there was some point not that long ago where there was a newsroom where the internet came up. And somebody was like, you can't use the internet.
Back to the typewriter you go.
Right, you got to search the public records. Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. We're talking a lot about what AI can do. Just show of hands. Is there anybody here that's worried or concerned about being misled about the election that's coming up on social media, if you have an Instagram, a TikTok, because of AI or some type of AI-generated content? Is anybody worried about that? So a few of you. Is everybody here on either TikTok, Instagram, Twitter? Show of hands who's on social media. Do you see political content on there? Put your hand down if you don't see any political content. So almost all of us are seeing something, right? Yeah, really interesting. We have one more audience question. Please, can I say your first, your last name?
Hello, I am Amber Maddox. I am from Flossmoor, Illinois. I am a graduate student here at Columbia College, Chicago, studying strategic communication. So with the AI being on the rise, the knowledge of it that is, and with more people openly admitting to using it to complete coursework, and it seems very encouraged, could AI be the reason that course or study programs could be shortened? In other words, faster graduation rates?
I think one benefit that I've seen, I don't know about shortening programs, but one thing that I've seen is more access. I think the evolution of technology in general may allow people who are not traditional students or even traditional journalists participate in these areas in ways that they wouldn't be able to. There might be people who have to work during the day and they're able to use platforms that allow them to, do schooling, and whether, again, it's in our field or not, and oftentimes off hours or in non-conventional ways. So I do think there is opportunity there. I don't know that it's going to get you through the program faster, because you still need the same skills to complete a program on the other side of it. But I do wonder, and I think it's an open question from my perspective, because I'm not in the education field, is how does it change how practical the work is? If schools aren't teaching, I would say the manual version of certain things, or they can kind of skip ahead to the more creative and more human-focused things. I wonder if it allows future students an opportunity to delve more into kind of the core coursework and find efficiencies beyond just some of the basic stuff.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Especially if you took student loans, I'm sure.
You just get more degrees. Get more degrees now.
Yeah. We have another question from the virtual audience. They would like to know, where do you see journalism in the next 5 years with the growth of AI? Morgan, why don't you tackle this one?
I see journalism as more trusted. I see more local news outlets. There's this rumor right now that local news is dying, and it's not true. I see every day across the country more local news outlets popping up, and I see more collaboration across us. We're a very collaborative sector, and we won this Pulitzer in collaboration. And so as we continue to think about what this work looks like, AI is going to fuel us to collaborate better, more efficiently, to systematize some of the things that hold us together back of house in our operations, to even run a newsroom, to be able to work together collectively. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. That in the next 5 years, I think you're going to see more collectives of newsrooms by county, by region, by state, fueled by AI, using AI processors and algorithms to support the operations of all of these newsrooms at once.
Such an important question. Morgan, great answer. Brian, if you don't mind, we'd like to get your take on it as well.
Oh, I think on top of everything that Morgan just said, also like much greater personalization of the news experience, both in terms of like what you can target to your audience, but also being able to, these big sophisticated database projects, for example, allow you to dig in and say what's happening in my neighborhood or my street or my block, right? And so being able to do that, I think, is great. I do think for news organizations administratively, though, like we are going to have to work really hard to defend ourselves against increasingly sophisticated uses of generative AI to try and trick people, right? And I think the solution to the AI problem is more AI, and these tools that I was talking about earlier are going to get better and better and better. But also making sure that we have that line of human defense, that there's not going to be a substitute for that, and so that we will be employing people to fact check. I think for a long time into the future. I don't think that's going away.
One thing I'd like to add to this, I think the technology will also democratize things a bit. We're a big honking organization, NBC Universal, and we're learning from the ways that you guys have been able to be innovative in this space. I think just this idea of innovation, entrepreneurial spirit, but democratizing the business itself, where, again, more people can contribute to the act of journalism, and you don't have to have a bunch of resources behind you to be able to do so. You're able to do smart, important, impactful journalism, even if you're a smaller scale operation, because you found ways to create efficiency. And I think the work that Morgan and team are doing, that is what the next phase looks like for all of us.
We're talking a lot about artificial intelligence and innovation in journalism. So speaking of that, we spoke earlier about some of the ways that AI is being used in content creation. It's also being used in new and exciting ways when it comes to visual storytelling. NBCU Academy spoke with Mark Greenstein, Senior Vice President of Creative Production and Operations at the NBCU News Group. He talked about the innovative ways his team is using AI when it comes to set design. Take a look.
I'm responsible first and foremost for what we look like and how we do it. So what do the graphics look like, our sets, our lighting, and then all of the technologies and workflows around how we achieve that on air. During the recent eclipse coverage, the vast majority of graphics that you saw both on air, kind of in full screen executions, and in the studios, we had an entire augmented and virtual rendering of how the sun and the moon interacted and casted a shadow. All of those graphics essentially started in AI. We're using very specifically Adobe's product that's called Firefly. We're using this feature more for ideation. So as we're sitting there storyboarding and looking for new ideas of how are we going to visually storytell, can this product help spark some of those ideas? And then we may take bits and pieces of it and then turn it into a final product. We had a dining room, but it wasn't quite the right aspect ratio. We circled the image and we said, hey, we need this to be 1920 by 1080. Hit go and it rendered out the whole room in like 5 seconds. Had a cabinet off to the side and we didn't really like the way it looked. So we literally just circled it and typed in, replace the cabinet with a wood cabinet. And it gave us this ugly white one. So we said, hey, how about a brown one? It really does open up so many possibilities of where we get inspiration from. This gives now a whole new way of just typing in basic prompts and then seeing what this technology creates and saying, hey, does that give me an idea of what I could do with it and sort of a starting point. We're really looking to say, how do we get more out of people? How do we spend less time on commodity elements like fixing up a scene or color correcting a scene, and how do we spend more time on the creative part of it, the ideation part, the storytelling part? We're not even in the first inning with this technology yet. And I think there's going to be a whole skill set on how do you get the most out of AI. Just knowing the prompts to type in, knowing how to ask it to do what you're looking for, that's an expertise, I think, of itself. And I think you're going to see people where that becomes part of their primary job. We're here because we want to storytell, we want to make high-end artwork. So if this could help make that artwork a little bit faster and give us more time for that, what I'll call the fun part, what I think is the fun part, the creative, that's really where we see the advantage in the tool.
That was extremely cool. I didn't realize that all that went into it. The moon one was like really impressive. Yeah. You work really closely with Mark Greenstein.
I just got off the phone with him right before I walked out here.
Yeah.
Did
you know all that was behind some of those sets?
I've seen this a few times, and every time I see it, what I love about it is, not to make it about Mark, but it speaks to Mark and people like Mark who, like, the goal is how do we spend more time on the creative and less on the routine. And you only get here if you've got ways to, in a process that has integrity and is protected, take off some of the routine stuff and just kind of open your mind to what if. Right. And I think, the glass half full version of this conversation is, AI technology leaves room for the what if, where in a given day, and I think especially as newsrooms continue to get crunched on resources and time, and you're only, the 4 o'clock news is the 4 o'clock news, whether you're ready for it or not. If you can take some of the more routine work off the table and spend more time on the creative stuff, you just get amazing work.
So let me ask you, he was just showing us how you can use AI in set design. It was amazing.
Yeah.
How can we use it to make us all better storytellers, better journalists, better writers, better just presenting a live shot? Is there a way to do that?
I'm really curious what these guys think on this as well. But one exercise that I think is helpful is if you think about kind of your work day, right? From the time you walk in the door to the time you turn in whatever the creation of your content is. Think about every single step that it takes to do that work. Every phone call, every gathering of information. If you're editing, whether it's video or text, all of the things that are in your workflow from the time you swipe your badge to the time you press send, publish, or play. And think about those steps that you would put in the creative category versus the routine category. Now imagine if you could put some of that, automate some of that routine stuff, and you have more time in the creative category. And so I think and Mark said we're not, I think his analogy was first inning, I guess that's baseball. I don't know how this works.
It's definitely baseball.
Some kind of sports reference. But if we're in the early stages of this, and that's kind of what we're able to do already, think about 2 or 3 not generations, because I don't mean that far in the future. Generations in AI time are like 2 months. But think of a few more iterations of this where the technology is a little bit more trusted, it's a little bit more stable. We've got the parameters in place, and you can spend a bigger slice of your pie on the creative. You can do more, actually. It's not about doing less and carving off less for your computer, so to speak. It's about how do you use your time in a way that's really focused on, as Mark put it, the fun stuff.
Yeah, Rashida said she was interested in hearing what you guys had to say. Just very quickly, Brian, same question. How do I use AI just to make me a better storyteller? But in this case, to lock down those facts I want to put in my story, to get the details just right. So often, sometimes, if you're on deadline, you're trying to figure out how to say this one thing, how to get this one fact right so you can write around it and build the story around it.
Well, I think the Miami Herald example is a good one of that, where you can summon those facts a lot easier. I don't know about the news organizations and folks here work in, but summoning things out of our archives is not easy, and it's very time consuming. And so, AI can help us to do that so that we can get sort of the background facts, the basics, the sort of like foundation that you build your story on together a lot faster. So I think there's that. The thing I'm always tempted to throw in here too is like AI is not new to journalism, and generative AI is relatively new, and people are innovating, and we're in the first inning. But journalists have been using artificial intelligence to automate tasks for a long time, right? I think a lot of newsrooms now are using Otter or Trent to do transcription that took hours, right? I mean, in a news organization our size, like tens of thousands of hours are now recovered every year that people used to spend transcribing their interviews. And so, before I came to NBC, I worked for many years at the Associated Press, and the reason I'm saying that preamble is because these were earlier iterations of AI, but we were able to partner with organizations that were able to create, for example, like a schematic map of the streets of Kyiv after the Russian bombardment, so that even though you couldn't go there and see it at that time because it was so dangerous, we could give people basically like a virtual tour of what it looked like and where the damage was, and that was a completely accurate rendering of the city, but it was generated through artificial intelligence. And so you can do things, you can tell stories in ways that we can't even imagine, that are going to be so much more sophisticated a few years from now. If we do that with transparency in mind and with the idea that we're not going to mislead people, we're going to inform people, I think the sky's the limit.
Morgan, did you have a quick thought? We want to get to some other questions here in the audience.
I think the role of being connected and responsive is fostered through the support of AI. I think to myself on a day-to-day basis how I get stuck sometimes and think to myself, well, how do I want to say this? And I just go to ChatGPT and say, this is what I'm trying to say. Give me the word for this. And it might not be the word that I use, but it is able to drum up other things. Right. And so when we think about being in community, every community is different. Every community needs different words to hear what you're saying. So it's not just narrative build and narrative change. It is how can we relate better, and AI helps us relate better to find the words that people can hear.
Sometimes communication isn't what you say, it's what the other person hears when you say the words that you use. Coming to another question. Can I have you say your first, your last name, if you're a graduate student, undergrad, your major, et cetera?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Lena Gebhardt. I'm a grad student at DePaul. And my question for the panel is that traditionally journalists rely on sources like the AP style book or the SPJ Code of Ethics, But in the context of AI, should we expect to see some sort of style book crop up? And if so, who would be responsible for designing that sort of thing?
I hope so.
I'll jump in and it's the second time I've name-checked my former employer, which I don't usually do. The AP has already come up with, in addition, a chapter of the style book that governs use of artificial intelligence in journalism. I think it's minimalist at this point. It's going to be built out. I think it's a good start. I mean, we all have our own sort of like style and standards considerations. We, at the news group, came up very early on with sort of a broad set of principles governing how we would use artificial intelligence. And the reason we did that at a high level is you sort of have to start there with that framework. And then, as you kind of get lower down more into the weeds and doing it, then you start to come up with more specific. And we're somewhere in the middle now, right? We're sort of starting to develop a clearer sense of like, what are okay uses? What kind of transparency needs to surround those uses? What are things that'll be off limits? And it really comes down to basically what Rashida said earlier, which is, you're just trying to sort out the risks from the opportunities and then mitigate those risks through best practices, right? And so, I think every news organization is going to have its own version of that, but a lot of that work has already started.
Great, thank you for your question. Great question. Morgan, another question for you. Last year, a Northwestern study found that more than half of U.S. counties are actually news deserts with no access or very limited access to local news. You were touching on this earlier. We'll kind of dig a little bit more in this. How can AI help to fill that void?
For sure. I think there's a lot of data already out there around trends that we could use to figure out in these local communities, what are the things that they care about, and start new newsrooms. The key here, when you're filling people's information needs, and I've harped on this, it really is being responsive. You can't build trust without being responsive. The quickest way to get information about people that you can't reach to be able to serve their information needs is going to be AI to plant seeds, but then we'll be able to use that to build out frameworks and protocols to ask better questions. As we ask better questions, we'll be able to seed more newsrooms. There are organizations right now, like American Journalism Project, seeding rural newsrooms, seeding conglomerates of newsrooms, but in order to do that, you need so much information to know what's going to be successful in a community, what a community is experiencing, what they want to hear, what beats are going to be relevant, and the only way to do that without being on the ground for a prolonged period of time, surveying, having all of these in-depth conversations, going to public meetings, is to have some support from AI.
We have another question in the room right now. Please, first, last name, what school you go to, etc.
Hi, my name is Annalika. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and I'm a current reporter for Illinois Public Media. My question is, with AI becoming easily accessible and so useful, a lot of us can get over-reliant on it with reporting. What advice would you have for us young journalists in this room so that we don't get lazy, and overall, how do we prevent lazy reporting?
Can I ask you to answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're a reporter.
I'm happy to answer it. Number one, all reporting starts with writing. So you need to be a writer. I'm an on-air journalist, but I write quite a bit. If you go to CNBC.com, you'll see I write almost every day. I write a column just basically about my show every day. I anchor our 5 a.m. show. My dad always used to tell me that a good craftsman never blames his tools. You need to learn how to use it and be responsible with it, but also every word, everything you say, it's on you. If it's wrong because the AI did it, it's on you. If it's right, it's on you. You can't become over-reliant on something that you don't actually need. It should only enhance your reporting. Sometimes you become over-reliant, maybe like on a crutch, if you hurt your leg or hurt your ankle, and your leg's weak, you're not strengthening it. If you're working on your skills every day, there's no tool that's gonna supersede your judgment, your abilities, the things that you know are right or wrong, and there's no such thing as a shortcut in life, or certainly not in journalism. Somebody was mentioning shortening your grad school program. I don't know if shortening would help you, deepening the knowledge that you're learning, deepening your experience, but sometimes you just need the reps. Sometimes you just need to get up, stand in front of the camera, write the stories, research, call the police station, ask the wrong question. Because then when you do the story, you'll be like, I should have asked that question instead of the question I asked. So I mean, that's my answer.
That's really great.
I'm sorry?
Something to add to that really quickly, I'd also say anchor yourself in the things that draw you to the craft to begin with. Like, I still get excited about talking to people every day. I still get excited about that. And so don't lose sight of the things that made you want to do this in the first place and keep practicing them, because you have to find fun in your approach. The scope won't always be fun. The story that you're writing about or telling won't always be fun. It won't always be the topic you care most about.
That part,
but if the
that
fun
part.
is in your approach and you always find your own fun, you'll always be finding things to do outside of AI, so you're not overly reliant on it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's the best part, one of the best points. It's not always going to be fun. Some days it's going to be boring. Some days you're going to kind of be trudging through it. I know for me, I always just try to find one thing I want to work on in everything I do, even if it's the same live shot about it snowing. I try to just do one thing different, one thing I can
They
go
don't
back
know
to.
anything about that here in Chicago.
I used to work in Chicago, unfortunately you do. We have another question in the room, so remember, this is a chance to ask questions, everybody. We're running out of time, so if you want to ask a question, you should go to the mic, and I'm going to toss it to you. Please, your first and your last name.
Hi, my name is Christina Eagleson, and I recently graduated from DePaul University with a BA in film and television. It seems like from a lot of the discussions today that the burden of determining whether or not AI is being used ethically or like sifting through misinformation, that kind of falls on the individual. So my question is, to what extent should this be regulated at a federal level, and what would that legislation even look like?
I think, for me personally, I'm not sure where the regulation should exist, but I do think there should be, at minimum, some type of uniform standards in our industry around the use of, disclosure of, and again, where the boundaries are. It's still very, very early days, and technology moves so quickly, and things like regulation and standardization doesn't move quite as quickly. And so I believe there should be some structure around usage. I just don't know at what level. Is it the government level? Is it industry level? I'm curious if you guys have thoughts.
I mean, I literally get paid to not have an opinion, but I will express an opinion. I think any kind of legislation of journalism is always a slippery slope and a little bit risky. And I think our industry and the responsible players in our industry have always done a really good job policing ourselves and accepting responsibility for the content that's on our platforms, which is one of the things that sets us apart from the world of social media. And so, I think that that's the most important piece of this, is that we quickly come up with some sort of accepted industry standards that are widely used, and that the audience that will increase trust with the audience at a time when that's obviously a crisis.
Yeah, some of this is in how we govern ourselves as a journalism community, as a sector. I, too, am not totally sure what we should be doing federally, but I would say that there are industry organizations that we're a part of that we cannot be a part of unless we have certain standards in our coverage and our journalistic integrity and how we report, how we disclose, how we're funded, all of those things. And so I think some of this is going to be nudged in how we relate to one another in community and set societal norms for how journalism has to function, and I think it will happen.
So I know we have another audience question. If you have that question, can you please walk over to the microphone? We'll give you a second. Oh, you're right there. Perfect. First and last name.
Hi, my name's Izzy Smith. I'm from Destin, Florida, but I'm a senior here at Columbia College Chicago. I'm a journalism major. And we kind of touched on this earlier, but I was curious, how can newsrooms and journalists use AI to reach communities in a more inclusive way?
The future of journalism is participatory. And so we have found that in our work, we have a lot of folks who are involved in our work. Even with the machine learning and AI for Chicago Missing Persons, there were 200 volunteers that also became data scientists and community-based data researchers as they compiled and reviewed all of these records and then did the algorithm building. And so I think inclusion isn't an outcome, it's a practice. It's the lens for how you do what you do and how you make decisions. If we want our use of AI to be inclusive, it'll be because the way that we design projects, the way that we design stories, the way that we build teams is also because we're thinking about participation, we're thinking about whose voices are represented, we're clear on where AI has limitations about whose voices will be represented and actively seek those out, and we're clear on where AI is going to allow us more expansive access to more voices to bring even more people closer. So I think it's all about our own.
Journalism is participatory. I haven't heard that one before. That's interesting. So speaking of, Rashida, I'm going to come back over to you. Recently, after an MSNBC Live event, you spoke with Variety about bringing the brand. How to do that?
So I don't think my quote was specifically in reference to AI, but the idea was following audiences where they are and ensuring that our brand, which appears in a lot of places, is continuing to stay ahead of the curve and where consumers, many of you who you may or may not get much of your content on places other than television. And so for a brand like ours that has such a stronghold in the TV space, how do we continue to get ahead, whether it's in audio, whether it's on social platforms or YouTube or digital, but finding ways, or in person, finding ways to continue to connect with our audiences where they are. You know, I think we're all still exploring how do we do that with the use of this technology, and how do we leverage it to make it easier and more streamlined. Again, acknowledging we're still in the early days of it, but I think there is a lot of opportunity for us to find connection. And my point was I want to look at every and any road to do that in a way that's of service to our audience.
Great. We have another audience question. Going to come over to you, please. First and last name.
Hi, my name is John McLashewski. I'm an educator, so I had an issue a little bit with when they adjusted the table and added a piece of furniture or changed a piece of furniture, and then it was just kind of described as that it furthered the story. And so to a certain extent, should that be disclosed in the idea of like transparency? We're adjusting it, but then maybe it's not accurately depicting what actually happened in that picture.
Yes, is my answer to that. But I think there's, Mark was describing a process that there was an image at the end in which the top of the table looked like an iPhone. That was the thing that actually appeared to the audience. And something like that, where it's so obviously not real, is a little bit different than if the interim steps where they're like making the tablecloth shorter and stuff like that. None of that was ever exposed to the audience. If it was, then absolutely disclosure. But there was another example in his video that was like a father and a son who were clearly like kind of cartoon characters. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to think that that's real. So in my opinion, disclosure is not necessarily there. And it really comes down to would a person reasonably think that they're being shown something other than what they're being shown, and then all of those cases, I think disclosure is necessary. And we work very closely in standards with Mark's team to kind of, especially when we're doing something new, to make sure that we're being transparent with the audience and not presenting something that could be in any way misleading.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else want to take a stab at that one?
No, I think that's accurate. I think we use images in a lot of different ways, and if we're talking about something that's artwork, that may have different license than a photograph.
I got a tough one for you guys. Last question. That's the last one.
Yeah.
Morgan, you're looking at me. Do you want to go first?
There's someone at the mic.
Oh, there's someone. I'm sorry. I didn't realize there was another question. I apologize. One more audience question. Please, first and last name.
Hi, my name is Jordan. I'm a freshman at Columbia, obviously. It's wash day. I gotta get closer. As someone who is slightly against AI and creative outlets in schoolwork, myself personally, do you think there will eventually come a time where automated intelligence is obsolete or evolve beyond what it is today? And are you in favor of this or against it?
I think it'll continue to evolve. I'm not in favor of or against it because it kind of just is. But I do think there will be a period where we're sitting up here and our children or our grandchildren are saying, like, my parents were around before this thing existed and they use AI, like whatever that is. So I think it'll continue to evolve. It'll go the way of potentially cassettes, 8 tracks, VCRs, but there will be some new technology that replaces it. So again, totally just who knows, because I can't look into the future, but I think technology will just continue to evolve and replace and update and upgrade.
And probably the robots will have replaced us by then anyway.
At that point, it's up to them.
And by the way, she didn't know any of those things you were talking about. She was like, cassettes, VCR.
That was my point.
We're almost out of time. Rapid fire, I'm going to go to you guys. Where do you see the news industry 10 years from now? Rashida, you're first.
I think I like what Brian said, and it's something that I feel very, very strongly about, is a lot more personalization. And I think it's personalization and participation. I'll channel Morgan also. I think people will be more involved in curating their information and not just for the sake of finding points of views that are like-minded, but finding things that are relevant to them. I think it'll just evolve in a way that we can't even imagine right now.
Brian?
I have high hopes that the things that set us apart, the things that make us special and trustworthy, are going to be even more valuable going forward, and that there'll be sort of a pendulum swing back to understanding the value that journalists and journalism bring to the public sphere, and that what we do is so different than anything that an AI can create, or that someone who wants to do bad things on social media can create. And so I kind of feel like that pendulum has already started to swing.
I'm really looking forward to how AI will allow us to hear more voices. You know, the root of our work is our ability to equip people with the information they need to navigate their communities and their lives. AI is going to allow for us in 10 years to hear way more voices than we have access to on the ground.
That's great.
What a great conversation. Thank you guys for letting me be a part of it. I know I learned a lot. A round of applause, guys. All right, that's going to do it for this panel on our first Student Innovation Summit. I want to thank our panelists and thank everyone for joining us in person and virtually for this discussion. Let's now toss it to the host of our summit, NBC News business correspondent Brian Chung, to close us out. Brian.
Hey guys, let's give it up one more time for this panel. That was awesome. Well, I'm just going to close out here, but I actually just want to ad-lib for a hot second because in the time that we have been having this conversation, a few news items actually broke on the AI front. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, cracked down on companies that they allege are using AI fraudulently. And then just a few seconds ago, actually, the OpenAI chief technology officer announced that she was going to leave the company and wants to do her own thing. So the regulation is moving fast. The industry itself is moving fast. There's a lot happening in this space, and that's what made the conversations today so interesting, so important, and so relevant. Well, again, thanks again to all the panelists and the moderators today for this summit. We appreciate your time. And we also want to thank our audience, the students, professors, young professionals here at Columbia College. Let's give a hand for everyone here at the Columbia College of Chicago. Yep. As well as those who engaged with us virtually, and we hope that all of you walked away with some tangible tools to help you navigate what is a rapidly changing AI world. And we also want to do a huge thanks here for our NBCU Academy Partner School right here again, Columbia College Chicago. Give it up for hosting us. Beautiful venue, beautiful people. Again, just a few blocks away from also the beautiful Lake Michigan. And guess what, by the way? We had a competition going on with the schools to try to see who registered the most amount of people. So we're going to reveal the winners right here. In gold, Columbia College Chicago. Give it up. Amazing. And it's silver is the City College of New York. And also shout out, yep, give it up to New York. And also New Mexico State University with the bronze. Amazing job, everyone. And we also did this inside Chicago as well. And shout out to DePaul University for the greater Chicago area, winning the most amount of registrations, followed by Northwestern University in Evanston. Shout out Northwestern. And then Illinois Media School as well. Amazing job, everyone. And then finally, thanks to our friends at Comcast NBC Universal Project Up as well for partnering with NBCU Academy and supporting tomorrow's digital innovators. And if you missed the summit, don't worry. We're going to make all this available for you to watch later on NBCUacademy.com. And NBCUacademy.com is also where you can go to level up your journalism skills throughout the year. We've got so much great content on there. Make sure to visit the site often, frequently to check out the videos, articles, journalism courses, career advice, and more. And to our audience in the room, I want to say stick around. We've got some great giveaways happening. And for those of you at home, we will see you next time. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks.
Fantastic, guys.
Hello, hello, hello. Please remember that we're going to give you a gift for your patience, for your participation, and for being